I feel, and that way, if people are joining late or later, maybe give them that reminder to watch back. Okay. And Joan already also suggested something in the chat.
I don't see it pop up. Yeah, Panu, if you want to just send out the meeting invite again. Oh wait, I have to do that. Well, you wouldn't mind giving me 1 minute? I can't present and send an email at the same time. So if you wouldn't mind waiting 1 second, I'll just resend the invite to the committee, and then we'll get the presentation up. And I don't, is anybody else having trouble with audio? I hear everybody just fine. I think it's you, Panu. Okay, let me resend the committee invite and I'll pull up the presentation and we'll get started. Felicia, I guess you and Ian could approve the meeting summary from the last meeting while I'm doing that.
Okay, cool. So this is where I officially call the meeting to order, I suppose. Welcome, Ian. Good to see you. Let's go ahead and take a look at the minutes from our last meeting, and then we'll need a motion. If you could, please, Ian. I guess you'll have to do it via chat. 1 minute. Cool. Okay, I see in the chat that Ian has made a motion to approve the minutes of our last BAC meeting. I'll second that motion. And all in favor? Aye. There's no opposition. We'll go ahead and approve those minutes. Thank you, Ian. And then I'm actually like moving really slow because I'm trying to pull up the agenda for today, Sophia. Because I'm not remembering off the top of my head what we had first on there.
So first up is Dan and I will give you guys a report of kind of the report, which you already know about, but just more of the comments received during the comment period and some suggestions that we have as part of that recommendation. And so that'll be kind of a short PowerPoint, and then we'll just jump into finalizing the committee's kind of recommendations to the CMC and adding anything that the committee feels missing or anything like that. And we can send it out afterwards to the whole committee. Any additions we kind of want people to be able to discuss. So it would be great if more folks are able to show up during the discussion, just because making sure all of what they wanted included was kind of the whole point. So, and you know, I guess we can also just report that the first meeting was very well attended. We had most of the folks, but this one was light attendance, so that influenced our recommendation. We could figure that out depending. Okay, pulling up the PowerPoint. And now I need to get all of you back so I can see you. The chat back up so I can hear what Ian has to say.
I'll help keep an eye on the chat as well, Sophia. I'll let you know if I catch anything.
Awesome. Okie dokie. Apparently today is the sun is taking a slow time to get up. We're just getting we're taking a slow time to start. So Approve the minutes, kind of getting into the route modification report itself. This first slide you all know, but it's grounding for everybody that might not, which is basically, kind of our process through this past 18 months, starting in August of 2020, to move away from the freight rail corridor. We talked about this last meeting, but just, we spent a good amount of time kind of talking about that project transition, developing goals, looking at areas to study. We released the routes, and then we published the draft route modification report for 45 days in December of 2021 for a 45-day comment period. Kind of made changes and things based on all of that. And then that got us to the route modification report. We went, we talked in great detail, I think, at our last meeting about what was in that report. And so today we're not going to repeat that. Instead, we'll let you know what we heard from the world about the report itself. So the comment period went from April 18th to May 27th. It was 38 days. We initially had 30 days, but we extended it just a little bit over a week. Longer based on people wanting a little bit more time to respond. We received over 1,000 comments on the report, and those were from in-person meetings. So people either writing comments or we talked to them and put sticky notes, and they put sticky notes. So from long comments to short comments, and then we had multiple electronic ways for people to kind of write in. And overall, the comments kind of fit into, we kind of break it up into how could we address this comment? Where does it kind of fall? If you go into, I'll give you a few examples of what people actually wrote in, but if you online or in the packet of materials that was sent out to you, in addition to the couple slides that I'll show about community feedback, we also took the comments and kind of did a summary to each project goal, like we did last time. So kind of how they fit, what we heard, how it fits or doesn't fit with the goals. Welcome, KB. I don't know if anybody else has joined, but I see KB. Welcome. Thanks for coming on. And we'll get to, Dan will get to it later in the slides, but there was also just kind of two sets of comments that we specifically called out in our addendum to the route report, just because in some ways a lot of comments that we receive, we're at the point where until we do more work, we can't really address them, versus comments that are specific to the decision that we're making now. So that's partly how we're showing kind of summarizing some of the engagement comments. And to kind of give an example of that is if somebody's commenting about station, location, and overall design, until we move forward, we can't fully respond to that, right? That's part of the process coming up. If folks are wondering about safety on Metro Transit, that's something the agency is working on and will need to continue to work on. Road design, same, right? We need Nick and his team of consultants to roll up their sleeves and answer those kinds of concerns. Same with environmental impacts, things like people asking about noise or vibration or traffic impacts. Our route modification report, if you notice, is just like a little bit over 100 pages. When we complete our environmental documentation, there'll be thousands of pages. So to really address look at those impacts and fully address them, we need to do a lot more work. So that's part of why we split up the comments as they are, because it lets us know how people are feeling about the route themselves and what this team needs to tackle and focus on moving forward. To give a few examples of kind of what we heard. So you kind of see this bucket of general support or opposition. A lot of times that was people writing in very, very short comments. And so that's why they didn't necessarily go into other categories. People just saying, I support this, I don't. And the flavor of those two were in support. It was folks often writing about that it was an improvement over the original route, that it served destinations, that it connected to people that needed transit the most. And then for those that really did not like the route, often it was worried about a budget or ridership or Met Council kind of plan overall of systems. Lot of feedback about just on-street parking, especially for businesses, and wanting us to look at that more into the future and kind of come up with solutions. Corridor wide, we heard a lot about landscaping, traffic calming, safety for pedestrians, and just kind of along the way, the full set of infrastructure, including bicyclists. Kind of the bucket above, just a lot of questions about noise, traffic, kind of the overall environmental impact, as well as property impacts, and the effect of construction. So those are themes that we've been, kind of working, that we've heard early on and continue to hear. And so, for example, the engineering team looking at parking has been something that's been on the docket kind of through the route modification process and will continue to be. Bucket of safety and whatnot, just on the system overall. People wanting us to make sure the light rail is still helps with travel time. Does it actually improve our ability to get around town? Recognizing that even though there was a lot of engagement done, there is still a need to do a lot more, and kind of lean into that. Dan will hit on some of this came through the desire of like the Lynn Park residents to chat more about the options, and then the anti-displacement as well. So that's kind of an overall summary. You can dig deeper into any of that, and you could read all 1,000+ comments. They are published in the addendum online and sent to you directly. I see, I think CW is Chris.
Then we might have question or a comment or two. I'm looking at the chat. Mike Opat mentioned that there were significant comments in opposition, Robbinsdale, about the design in road corridor. And then I did post that after hearing, or first, actually, I don't know if we want to respond to or address that. But Mike, I totally recall reading comments from Robbinsdale going both ways. So I appreciate you acknowledging that. And perhaps because I wasn't paying as much attention to the last page because I was typing my comment, so I don't know if that was included or not, if that's why Mike mentioned that comment there in the chat. Was there anything in addition you wanted to say, Mike?
No, I would just say that I think these presentations typically understate the opposition in Robbinsdale to that design, and it's always kind of soft sold in these meetings, and there's including significant opposition on the city council. That's here at the hospital. We support the station at the hospital, but once you go into downtown Robbinsdale, there's significant opposition and concern here about how our ambulances will get through. So it's kind of a steady theme amongst the presentations that the opposition in Robbinsdale is downplayed, and I just need to point that out. It's not even. It's not. There's when you have 40% of the city council or probably more that do not like the design. That's significant everywhere but to the Met Council apparently.
Thanks for that input.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate your input. One of the things, go ahead, Sophia.
No, I was gonna say, do you want to? I know you added to chat, so before we turn it over to Dan, do you want to?
Yeah, around the environmental report, just hearing that there will be thousands of pages added once that comes in. I'm just wondering how we, Met Council, how do we, or how is it typically like approached in making that information digestible? And I say accessible, not so much like I understand like maybe having it in different languages, but 1,000 pages of text is overwhelming even for me, and I read thousands of pages of text a week. So I can just imagine how that might be for somebody definitely interested in this, but really trying to like, how do you go through that? How do you approach that? How do you find what you're looking for or discover the things that you didn't know? And that question doesn't need to be answered right in this moment, but I think it's something important to start thinking about if uh, we haven't already, and perhaps something to elevate in the engagement cohort space, um, just kind of in preparation for when that does come out. I'd rather, we be kind of ready to help
Yeah,
folks
no,
digest that information versus, and then even us. Like, so I would even argue that on the BAC or the CMC and even the committees, I know you all give your reports, and we know how it can be sometimes when they're long, and but I think as we kind of move forward, start thinking about how we like do that in a way where we still all feel like we're being brought along and not necessarily just kind of along for the ride because all the words. Yeah.
yeah, um, I think that's really important. I've been thinking about this a lot. And I think conversations with the committee as we get into the next phase will be super important because it is this big document and it has this official release and very official comment period that gets official responses, and the documents are coordinated with the FTA and all that kind of stuff. And so I think this team will be exploring and will need to think about how we start to talk about what's coming together in the document, and how you kind of interpret it and navigate it. Because if you have a specific concern, things are broken up into chapters and things like that, but how you kind of tackle it and what the overall environmental process is, because we have to confirm our environmental path with the FTA, but we do anticipate that there'll be kind of two documents that'll be part of the process. So, and even kind of what the document does, right? Like we talk a lot about the environmental document, but like, why is it important? What does it do? What doesn't it do? Where does it help people get commitments that they want from the project, or maybe where does it leave off? I think are all conversations that I've started to hear or have talked to folks with, and so having that overall conversation. I think one of the things that has stood out for folks when we've been having some conversations is that it's a legally binding document. So part of the whole process with the environmental document is to identify where there are impacts, attempt to avoid them, and then if we can avoid them, to minimize the impact, and then suggest mitigation. And those mitigations are something that the public has the ability in the comment period to basically influence. So and then it's no matter whether any of the project faces are working on this project, that's stuff that has to happen. So noted, and I do think it's feels like it can feel like a very inaccessible document. So doing that kind of education about what it is leading up to the publication of it, it will help. So I'll stop talking about, but I just really want to emphasize that I think all of the outreach team and other members of the team really agree that we have to lean into it, and maybe in ways that we haven't before, because there's all of this like squirreling away in the background collecting data, and then it's like, here it is, and that would be an overwhelming process. Kind of how can we as a project team, where there is this very official process, still share information in a way that it isn't surprising or overwhelming when it is officially published. So don't have all the answers, but have the overall desire, and we'll be kind of lean into that engagement plan. I'm talking very slowly today, so I will just turn it over to Dan to maybe have more eloquent speech than I am currently having right now.
Well, eloquence and me speaking don't typically go together, but we'll see what we can do for this morning. So, for the members of the Business Advisory Committee today, probably not a great surprise in this revelation, but our staff recommended route for the Blue Line Extension project is essentially, as you see on this map. We look to continue to utilize West Broadway and the 4 station areas along West Broadway on the north end of the project in Brooklyn Park. So we would still have our termini, if you will, our north termini up in Oak Grove, up near Oak Grove Parkway and north of Highway 610, a station around 93rd, a station around 85th and North Hennepin Community College, and a station around Brooklyn Boulevard. The north end stays the same. Our recommended route for the middle of the corridor would be to utilize County Road 81 through South Brooklyn Park, through the city of Crystal, and through the city of Robbinsdale. And in this area, these are now kind of station areas rather than actual station configurations. We need to still kind of determine the design configuration of the stations, but we would look to have a station at 63rd near the park and ride there, a station at Bass Lake Road in the city of Crystal, a station in downtown Robbinsdale somewhere north and south of 40th in some kind of a configuration, a station at North Memorial Hospital right at Lowry, and then we are recommending the route continue on West Broadway. And so in this case, it would travel on West Broadway from essentially Lowry and West Broadway at the Robbinsdale border to West Broadway and Lyndale. And in that area right now, we're recommending a station area in and around Plymouth and a station area in and around Emerson Fremont area, with the possibility of connecting to the D line and some other options. Now you see a little wider circle there. The configuration as we go into the environmental document includes looking at the use of looking at the use of West Broadway and or the use of 21st in that kind of segment between Irving and Lyndale. And so that'll be part of our ongoing engineering work. From Lyndale and West Broadway, we then propose to connect in the downtown to Target Field. We had looked towards Lyndale and then a connection into Target Field. We have received some feedback most recently about, is Washington Avenue still off the table? Could we look at possibly coming out of downtown up Washington to West Broadway and across? And the possibility is there. I want to just make sure folks understand that route recommendation is that we utilize West Broadway rather than a Lowry option for the LRT route through this area. That is consistent with what the report says. We are going to open up the idea of looking at more than just downtown to Lyndale to West Broadway. There's some configurations down at the south end as we leave Target Field. Do we go up 7th Street? Do we go up East Lyndale and 6th Avenue? Could we get over to Washington Avenue, come up across next to or across the West Broadway Bridge and come in that way? Those to look at those options is still part of what we want to do. A little bit like the 21st piece. And do we want to still look at how we connect to that? We also received a number of points about how the anti-displacement work fits in with this. Do we and should we have the anti-displacement work done and in place before we even select a route? We don't think that is a necessary direction. As a project team, we certainly believe that doing the anti-displacement work and looking at impacts in conjunction with the environmental documentation at the same time is the right time. Would still be done earlier than it's been done on any other project, if done at all on any other project. And so we think that the timing is right. So I also want to recognize that we did receive and will add to the addendum of the route recommendation both the city of Robbinsdale's city council resolution and the city of Minneapolis's city council resolution. And so those will by addendum become part of the route recommendation report. And to kind of identify what Mike Opeth talked about earlier, we want to make sure that the route recommendation report identifies key concerns by the city of Robbinsdale Council about the design on 81 and to take into consideration the factors that go into the design along 81 if we're going to make it a successful way to integrate that an LRT line into the community. So those are all part of what we're pulling together as we bring this route recommendation report and the addendum to the route recommendation report to you guys as a business advisory committee, and then eventually to the CMC and to the county board and to the Met Council. Mike asks in the chat, was the resolution in the packet, Sophia? I don't know if it was hooked on somewhere in the packet we sent out to the business advisory committee.
Yes. So, and just to reiterate, so we sent the route modification report addendum. So that includes our acknowledgement of the Robbinsdale resolution, and the noting the concerns about the design on 81 and the project team's desire to continue to work with the city on those concerns. The agency resolutions are also attached to that addendum at the end of all of the comments received from the community. So Trevor, could you throw in chat the direct link to that? It was sent on our website for folks to open it. It was sent as part of the committee packet, but we'll throw that link in chat real quick for everybody if you want to.
Can we verify? Can we verify, Sophia, that Mike has his North Memorial email address as a member on that advisory committee list? I mean, we don't have to verify it right now. I just want to verify that he is on that particular list. Maybe that's more for Panu to make sure that that's part of our BAC roster. So that's where we land. And so the next piece, I think, I don't know where the PowerPoint went. I'm not sure where Sophia went. I haven't left, have I?
You're still here, Dan.
Okay.
Right. I wonder if it's something with her connection, because it's still letting her present, right? I wonder if we could, if someone requests remote control, if that would work.
Well, what can other people see on their screen? Can people see the presentation?
Report next steps, Dan.
Okay. I don't even see that, but that's okay. I know the presentation by heart anyway. So So the next piece then is, okay, so now what happens, right? It's a little bit about what happens next. If we do oh, Sophia just lost power. Oh, okay. Golden Valley must be there's no storms over there, are there? Anyway, so what happens next is what will if we bring to FTA. Go ahead, Nick, to the next slide. If we bring the FTA well, here's where we are in the schedule. So in the overall schedule, you can see that this route recommendation really ends about a 12 to 18 month process of looking at and determining, is there a route that we can really begin work on, right? I mean, in this particular case, we're just now beginning what ends up being, 5, 6, 7 years of process on implementing a federally funded LRT project along this northwest corridor of the county in the Botno corridor. And so bringing this forward to FTA, we will give them information on what we think are the next steps. We believe that will be to do a supplemental environmental impact statement and a supplemental final environmental impact statement. And then begin that environmental part, work towards a municipal consent plan, which will need approval by each city and by the park board and by Hennepin County and by Met Council, work towards and begin engineering. That all happens around a 30% design plan. And so really the environmental piece moving forward, we think takes 1.5 years, and we will study effects of the project. We'll finalize station design areas. We'll finalize roadway configurations. We'll finalize turning movements. We'll finalize access points. We'll finalize station configurations. We'll finalize park and rides. Finalize is the wrong word. We'll finalize locations and advanced designs to about a 30% level. And that's at that point when we'll look to, are we reaching a municipal consent plan that's acceptable to the various communities? That will happen probably about 1 year from now. So that's really where we are in the next step, followed then by finalizing design and things like right-of-way acquisition, and then eventually construction. So on the immediate basis, we talk a lot about, we can go to the next slide, Nick. We talk a lot about the environmental piece, and these are just some of the things, right? So this is pretty set in federal rules and regs that the environmental review documents the impacts of the alternative studied, documents the ways to avoid, minimize, or mitigate those impacts. And they include everything from noise and vibration, from construction, and from the operation and maintenance of light rail, visual impacts from the train, property impacts, both temporary and permanent, as a result of the project, impacts to all the other environmental things you can think of: soil, water, air, sewer, parks around it, and then also safety and adequately moving around people, bikes, pedestrians, drivers on the road, and all of those elements. So that will all be what's part of the environmental work. And then that happens as we continue to further develop design plans, stations, sidewalks, roads, traffic signals, turn lanes, all those kind of things. And of course, all of that is done in and around continued public engagement among various things. So that's the formal piece of what we wanted to do today. That's the formal part of the presentation. We leave to you the route recommendation as a business advisory committee. This, of course, will be part of our corridor management committee on Thursday morning. we have gotten, and I believe pulled together a resolution of sorts from the Community Advisory Committee. We would look to do the same kind of thing here. We would look for general representation of the feelings of this body with recommendations to go to the CMC as it's put together. So, Nick, can I give this to you? I don't see if Sophia's not back.
I'm on, but I
good.
no longer have power in my house. So if Nick could go into the committee folder, there is a Word document that's titled the draft BAC recommendation to CMC, and pull that up. We can then work with the committee to edit it and add anything that's needed. Sorry, all. Don't know why the power went out, but it did.
No apologies necessary, Sophia. We're glad that you were able to rejoin. And while Nick pulls that up, this draft here was, as Dan said, it was pretty much formulated based off of the direct comments this committee gave at our last meeting, in which, of course, we had a lot more folks. So we had a lot more feedback. But what we're wanting folks to do is really, as we review this, think about what's missing. Is this accurate? Are there things that aren't considered here, things we need to add or clarify? Does this language, make sense? Do you think it's a proper representation? And hopefully we can kind of work through that and finalize what this looks like. The CMC meeting is what, 2 days? Just a few days away. So we're really hoping that even the folks who may not be on this call today, if you know any of them, I encourage you to just hit them up and say, hey, make sure you check your email, see if you have any comments or anything on this, the draft of our recommendations. And if they could do that within the next day, that would be ideal, so that when I'm reporting to the CMC, what I'm reporting properly reflects this particular committee, our thoughts and our recommendations. You can go ahead, Sophia. Just wanted to add that. Sophia, did we lose you again? Possibly.
I'm muted in 2 places. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Yes.
Awesome. Sorry, I'm on my phone because I do not have power. So what we tried to do is at the last meeting, the committee went around the table and everybody kind of made some comments about the route recommendation report. And so we tried to reflect those in the document that Nick has up right now. You keyed it up, right? If folks want to make additions or subtractions or anything like that, that is the point. It does not need to be 100% consensus. And so what I mean by that is, for example, the CAC at their meeting, we have a few folks that really still want to see an elevated option in part of the corridor, and some other folks that are very, very concerned about elevated. So we basically just reflected that, right, is that some committee members want to see this looked at more, while others hope we don't go in that direction. It's to give the CMC a flavor of what to weigh as they make decisions going forward. So, but it's really good to talk it out as a committee where things might not be hitting the mark, or how we want to reflect some of that. So, Chair, if you're ready, I'd say just open the floor for that discussion, including anything that you would want to modify.
one of the things, I mean, if I can just kind of kick it off, and hopefully hear other people's thoughts. And I know I spoke a little bit about like environmental report stuff there in the chat as that was mentioned, but I felt like there, it doesn't look like we had a lot of discussion about environmental like impacts or any recommendations there. So I did want to raise that, mostly because in my personal conversations with people in the neighborhood, this is like really important. Folks are saying that they're concerned that it hasn't been done yet, or they're really interested in what comes out of this environmental report. So I'm wondering from this committee, are there any particular like recommendations, things that pop up for you with regards to like environmental impacts of this route? Okay, it looks like CW, which I'm assuming is Chris Webley, was asking, what are we talking about right now? Right now, we're looking at a draft of a recommendation that will be coming from the BAC committee that will be reporting to the CMC later this week. And what you see right now is a culmination of the comments and things that this committee gave, like at our last meeting or even previous meetings, some of the insights that the project team's been gathering to be included, particularly in this recommendation. So if there are things that are missing, or even if you haven't had a chance to read it yet, are there particular things that you want to bring up when it comes to something like environmental considerations, is what I just mentioned? Also, any design considerations, anything around anti-displacement that's not included here, support for the route, caveats, those sort of recommendations. Because what happens, as I understand it, is the CMC is the governing body that's going to vote on this final report. Is that correct? Am I using the right words, Sophia? I want to make sure I'm being accurate.
Yes, the CMC will take a vote to recommend, so also forth recommendations to Hennepin County and the Met Council. Those bodies will then vote to adopt the route recommendation and basically give the okay to staff to do additional work on this project. It's an important step because we need to begin our environmental documentation and basically knowing what we're looking at broadly in those documents helps us do that.
Thank you for the clarification. I do have another clarifying question. 21st option. Was the 21st option proposed? This is what derived of what in Alexander was initially sort of proposing, or was this proposed by this committee? I guess, because my understanding is that for it to go down 21st, it has to be a north and south direction, which ultimately is still one direction, as I understand it, that would have to go down West Broadway. So kind of just trying to wrap my head around where that originally derived from. And I think if we're putting stuff on what we're proposing, since we are proposing, I just want to better understand that a little bit.
So the 21st option, it was, Ian's on the call, so he can add to chat. We did initially get the idea from him, but part of why we heard kind of the discussion from others, and part of it overall why it was considered was, one of our project goals is to minimize acquisition of property, and especially to kind of major community assets. And as we were looking at the West Broadway route, we had a few impacts that we felt that there still should be options explored. Again, this is partly why we have both options on the table, is we think before we make a decision on what to do, we need to do additional work. And so that means more design work.
potentially looking through the environmental lens, all that kind of stuff. Dan or
So,
Nick, anything to add on that front?
so is the assumption that you guys have done an assessment on the impact ratio as it relates to 21st as an option and West Broadway and made that side-by-side comparison? I don't think I've seen that comparison because visually looking at 21st, my guess is that there's more impacts on 21st. Second from that, I just want to follow up, since it did derive from N's point of view. My understanding is, and I haven't talked to N, so I hate to put him on the spot, but my understanding of since then, he has maybe abandoned that idea of that this is the best, which I know initially was largely in consideration for his development on West Broadway. So and can you clarify, is that still sort of like your point of view, or have you abandoned it? Because again, I guess I'm really hesitant. I'm just being vocal of just the idea of proposing 21st as a alternate option without having done the assessment. And maybe we just clarify if the assessment has been done, but I haven't seen a side-by-side assessment. I think we're talking more visual, which I would, and so I don't know. Clarifying questions that I just want to throw out there for conversation.
Well, I'll go ahead and let Ian put some things in the chat. But Chris, I think to address your point, the reason both the idea of using 21st and or using West Broadway and or some combination of both is continuing forward in this recommendation is because that side by side direct comparison and full engagement with the community has not yet been done. And so that's why we're not recommending in a report just 21st, just West Broadway, or any specific design between those 2 points. There are pros and cons for either. And really, this is less about who suggested it and more about the fact that from a business or from a building impact standpoint, that section between Lindale and Irving is about as tight as there is anywhere along the alignment. And so it's really important to look at, okay, if we want to actually provide good ability for vehicles to drive through here, good ability for LRT to move through here, along with a station stop, ability for vehicles to make left turns in and out of the neighborhood, adequate sidewalks, good places to be able to move around and connect through here. What are the best design options? I've had people say, we can't shove everything on West Broadway. Something's got to go on 21st. I've heard a lot of people say, we can't use 21st. 21st is not a good spot for any of this stuff. And so there's a wide variety of feelings there. It's really going to come down to a matter of space. It's going to come down to where is the best place to put all the things we need. We did a very similar thing. If you've ridden the Green Line LRT through the University of Minnesota, you know that there's a segment there through campus on Washington Avenue where through vehicular traffic went away. That was a similar kind of a thing, is where we said, okay, we can fit everything in. What does that mean? If we try to squeeze everything in, what if we put this over here, that over here, change that around? That's a little bit about what our analysis will do. So that work is still ongoing. Felicia's putting a few things in the chat. She's right. I mean, this whole analysis will be, and it's not like we want to pit business or building owners along West Broadway against residents or building owners along 21st. We just want to find out where's the best balance so that we can get in what needs to go in terms of infrastructure, how it fits with what's there today, and then also in a bigger picture, how does this decision affect what might be along West Broadway or 21st in the future as we do this? So that will be a big piece of work ongoing.
Yeah, I think it's just to Felicia's point, not to beat a dead horse. I think it's going to be important to engage folks on 21st. And I just want to call out something that you said. I mean, you said that it's about space. And so I guess I'm wondering, in the context of this conversation and community engagement, is it really about space, or is it about community feedback, or is it a balance of the two? Maybe it's a balance of the two, but either way, I know that folks along 21st have not been engaged to get to this point, which is what is concerning for me, and that it is an option, and that one tenant out of the 25 units that we have on 21st couldn't tell you that it's even an option, that it's going to pass right in front of their doorstep. So.
And Chris, we've got to fix that, right? I mean, I know that I personally have talked to several property owners along 21st, but certainly not all of them, and certainly not a lot of. You're right about tenants is a good spot where sometimes it gets a little bit lost, and so we need to get out there and get that feedback as well.
Well,
Yeah,
Dan,
it is
just
about. Go ahead.
what I'm hearing too is just a balance of not, because I mean, owners are one perspective, but I would argue that I don't know how much weight an owner who doesn't live in the community should have, as opposed to a tenant who's been living in this same house for the last 20 years and they've lived on 21st. And so I think that's sort of the differentiator, and the level of detail that I think we need to get to is getting to the resident level, and not so much playing at this hierarchical level of just weighing in on what project owner or building owners want. I mean, generally it's an economic lens that they're going to start with first, which I don't think is the appropriate lens when we talk about these types of projects.
No doubt. Good points, Chris. And when I want to just make a quick comment about the space versus community engagement piece. I mean, space is a fixed number, right? There's X number of feet. So it's how you use it, right? That's part of what we want to get out of community engagement, is where do people find the best way to use that space is. And if people say, well, we really think wider sidewalks make more sense, the options become, we potentially acquire some additional buildings. We potentially, try to fit everything in on West Broadway. And it's possible, but then it has different impacts than if we try to put something one direction of travel, one direction of LRT on 21st. How do we use everything that we've got to come up with the best design possible? And this is very similar. I mean, this conversation is we're talking right now about the 21st West Broadway piece right there, but this same conversation will be had at Penn. This same conversation will be had in Robbinsdale. The same conversation will be had in Crystal, and has been for the most part had on Brooklyn Park up on West Broadway in the north. Is that, how do we make the choices that satisfy the transportation and access and mobility needs, but also take into consideration impacts on adjacent neighborhoods and adjacent businesses and adjacent properties? That's part of the work that goes into a big project like this.
Chris, this is Felicia. I really, really appreciate your comments as a resident who lives on 21st and who has lived there for a while. I happen to, own my home, but I know that on my particular block, it's about half of us that own our home. But, my neighbors, we've lived here I've been here for, 12 so years in this particular location. So I really do appreciate you mentioning that we really have to think about the residents when we're doing this engagement, and really take it to that level versus just kind of, I know in this particular group, we do deal more with businesses and owners of property. But I'll just reiterate what Chris said, is that we will have to see beyond that, because of some of those people who own the property, as Chris said, don't live here in the neighborhood. Some don't even live in the state. And so when we're talking about who's empowered to make decisions about how this neighborhood literally transforms in the next 15 years, I think it really should be those of us who have lived here, because I think that gets back to the real anti-displacement kind of work. Outside of like, if businesses are just displaced, there are people, potential customers, right? Residents, Northsiders who want to be able to stay and benefit. That should also be super heavily involved in making the decisions about what happened. So thank you for that, Chris.
So I would just add to, I'm not familiar with the 21st thing. I think those points are good, but really it's got to be a balance. I mean, the owners have to matter too. Whenever government engages, it can't really be, it shouldn't be too selective about with whom it engages. So the flip side of the coin about engaging locally would be some of the road projects where the owners of the businesses or whatever, when their parking is going to disappear, weren't really even contacted or were overwhelmed by advocates who live 25 miles away, will never bite that quarter but show up for the meeting. I mean, Hennepin County had a long history of that. I mean, one only needs to look at Washington Avenue and some of the other ones, major thoroughfares, where bike lanes were crammed in there and businesses lost all their parking. It's happening in Uptown now. So it's got to be a balance. So good points all the way around, but it sounds like there's work to do on 21st.
Yes, absolutely in agreement about that balance, Mike Opat. I think there's room at the table for all of us, because we're all part of the community, right? And I think we all should be helping shape it. Dan just posted that, he has to move on to his next meeting. He did mention that previously at the beginning of this. So,
Go
ahead.
This is Nick. I'm here too to help edit here, and I could help you, Felicia, facilitate as needed. So
Awesome. I appreciate that. Let me bring up my full screen again so I can read. Were there any other thoughts about what we're seeing here? Even outside of 21st, I know sometimes we kind of get in the weeds of certain areas and the discussion is good, but I didn't want to take away from some of the other things that we see here. KB, did you have any thoughts? I know that you're on the line. You tend to be a bit quiet sometimes, contemplative.
I do, but I kind of got to process some of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got to process it before I just blurt some stuff out.
For sure, I understand that. Sometimes it hits real close to home. You gotta kind of take a step back. I know how that is. I personally had a very visceral reaction seeing the 21st route. Because honestly, because I hadn't been engaged, I figured that it probably wasn't going to go on the modification report. But apparently, folks have been advocating for it, which just brings to mind to me that if it's something that you need to say or something that you think is important for this group to consider as a group, but also as the full project, this is absolutely the space to say something.
Well, selfishly, when I seen the 21st route, I was selfishly kind of happy at the fact that the gas station was gone.
I don't think. Winter.
Yeah.
I don't think it removes the gas station. Actually,
it would be the liquor store.
The liquor. Well, that building will still be there. The impacts, I believe, and this is where Dan can explain it more. I went to one of the community engagement events, and I talked at length with Dan about 21st. I still don't like it personally. That's a personal, very selfish. But I understand why it is in consideration still. And I still have questions about, I think the parking is important because it's been an issue in our area. Businesses have had, a need for there to be sufficient parking for their customers in this area, as well as residents being able to have parking for themselves. Everybody doesn't have, I can tell you right now, because I look at everybody's garage over here, everybody doesn't have a garage. And because not everyone's renting, some renters don't even have access, even if you see a garage on the property, if that makes sense. So us parking and our guests to our homes parking has been an issue for a long time. So I would have questions around both the like environmental impacts, what is sound, how does that shape safety in that area for our children?
Yeah.
There are schools right across West Broadway that a lot of our children go to. And there are things across West, the rest of the community is on the other side, right? And so the same kind of issues around safety, but like, what does that sound look like now that it's off of West Broadway and coming down the residential street? How does that change not just the physical look of things, but how the neighborhood feels and how we navigate it? So I think as like the engagement continues, which I hope it does throughout the summer, it's a great time for engagement. Hopefully like those questions get addressed and thought about when we're thinking about how we move forward. So.
But I mean, I agree with Chris, and we have to have a balance. But business owners are important. We most certainly are. But residents in the community are, their opinion to me carries just a little bit more weight.
I would love to get us all in a room together, like a community, right? So that the businesses aren't talking about what's important to them in one room, and then the residents are in another space. I think some intentional engagement that's like business owners and residents of this area.
I agree.
We like you all to come together and work on this together type thing.
I agree.
I do see a need for that. I talk with business owners because I work in that area, but my neighbors don't,
Right. And I think that is I think that is smart, and I think it's something that we desperately need to do, so that everyone is on the same page when it comes to, well, everyone's not going to be on the same page, but what's good and bad about this, because from the gate, my concern was making sure that we, the community is made whole after it's disrupted.
And this discussion is, and sorry to kind of bounce and not be as visible in the meeting, is part of why we didn't make a decision about whether to use 21st at this stage of the project, right? The project team completely agrees that we need both to do additional analysis to help the community see the trade-offs, kind of like the benefits and impacts of both options, as well as have much more focused community engagement, specifically on this topic. And some of that, it was hard to have, right? When people are like, well, you don't even know if you're doing Lowry or West Broadway, right? Like it just kind of helps us narrow down and focus and have these more kind of focused engagements on these very specific questions. And so I don't know if that influences anything that you want to include in your recommendations, but part of it is we wanted to just capture that the committee has lots of input on 21st, and the project team also recognizes that is an area that we need to do a lot more work in before we make decisions. And if that helps at all.
And also, KB, I'm not sure if you're looking at the screen right now. So additionally, what's already in this recommendation document around, say, anti-displacement, right? It says the BAC would like to see a commitment made to align the anti-displacement efforts with the Blue Line extension timeline, which includes topics around building wealth in the community and community visioning. So I do think that some of this engagement stuff we're talking about both kind of blends with what's happening in design on 21st, as well as the anti-displacement work or the recommendations we're making around that. So to rebuild trust that's been lost due to the history of injustice to marginalized community, to ensure there are supports in place for business and property owners, to minimize displacement of residents and businesses, and to recognize efforts of North Minneapolis entrepreneurs, business developers, and middle-class residents in the programming. Is there anything else you feel like needs to be added to that, or any of those areas after kind of what we just discussed? And not just KB, that question is actually to anyone still on the line from BAC. And also, if Mike is still on the line, because I know he mentioned wanting to, again, have a balance in what we're reporting on, what folks are saying, say in Robbinsdale, right? Do you feel like design considerations with regards to that make sense in here? Are there things that are missing, Mike?
I haven't looked at it all that closely, but
Okay.
I think that the bigger picture is going to have to be that the Met Council's got to re-engage with the City Council, and that's not my job to sort those things out. So
Mhm.
it has to be a new approach taken, and if they want a majority of the council to support it ultimately.
Understood. And I encourage folks, if you're still kind of processing and digesting, to take a look over it today, and please send back any comments or additions you feel like make sense to. Is it Sophia? Are you mentioning? Is that you, Nick? Sophia?
I'm the one I'm editing it, Alicia.
Currently, okay.
I have it shown, so
Yeah.
sharing.
As much as we can finalize today, that's the goal. Because again, we'll be reporting to the CMC on Thursday, I believe. Thursday, yeah.
And one of the ways that we could handle it too is if anybody just has additional thoughts, since the committee might not have time to discuss them, we can kind of add them to the end of comments. Please say we can hash that out exactly, but kind of like other things, specific items other committee members wanted mentioned.
Sounds good.
So I would hate to add something from an email we get and then somebody on this call be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. But noting that is definitely important.
Yeah, for sure.
Excuse me, what is the CMC?
Corridor Management Committee.
It is made up of basically all the mayors from the alignment, Hennepin County, the Met Council, and then there's a few agency partners like MnDOT and the Metropolitan Airports Commission. And then the BAC has a rep, the CAC has a rep, and then kind of this was a historical thing from the past project, the Blue Line Coalition also has a seat.
I don't know if I have a question so much as I have just I feel like the minimizing the displacement of residents and business is, I don't know why I kind of feel like when I'm reading it, I feel like I just kind of glaze over it. And I don't know if there's a way that can maybe be expounded upon, or if this is a place and time for it. But it just feels kind of glazed over and static when I look at it. And I'm not, like, I don't know, as I was reading, I was like, I know that there's no way to call out sort of like, I don't know, folks on this building. I don't know that there's certain, that there's going to be impacts. But I guess yeah, I don't know. It feels as a general thing, and I don't know if there's ways in that we can be more specific and maybe some metrics that we want to achieve. Or if, again, maybe it's just the commitment that we're going to continue to do more work. But,
Do you have specific suggestions, Chris,
no,
to strengthen it?
that's what I was
Like,
saying.
not, we could, maybe it's to, the other bullets somewhat try to capture it, but like something along the lines of displacement of neighborhood businesses or its people, something like it being super harmful or something like that, and doing everything it can to minimize any any takings or something like that? Is that kind of what you're thinking? Trying to get at what you're maybe trying to like emphasize, like humanize the comment more or something?
Yeah, maybe. But then I'm also too an engineer, so by nature I'm a tweaker. I always go back and keep picking at things, and since we have the time, I was just so it's. But I do like those points of identifying people. Also, too, like the idea of aligning it metrically to like community feedback, sort of weighing. I don't know. However, you were going in a good direction with adding people and layering in community feedback as like a metric of how we would measure against like the displacement of businesses and how that would be. Yeah.
I also think the language that the anti-displacement work group uses is specific about the displacement. So it talks about cultural displacement, economic displacement, and also like the physical displacement of people. So I don't know if we maybe want to pull some of that out of that, because to me it shows a little bit more intention and thought about what we're talking about.
Yeah, I like that.
So to capture like the physical displacement, cultural displacement,
economic,
so like kind of an economic, yeah, the kind of we're taking this building, you're getting displaced through the rising costs, or the culture of the community is changing. So the three main.
Indeed, things that, we know one of the ways folks like residents who don't own property are displaced in a community like this is that the price of things go up, because maybe we talk with the property owner or the landlord, they got exactly what they wanted, the value of their stuff went up, and now they raise the rent because for them it makes economic sense, but doesn't make economic sense if the people living in the neighborhood aren't getting an increase in what their income is, right? There aren't jobs, like living wage jobs being created to counteract the fact that somebody's great property is rising in value. The value of that person staying there should also rise, right? And so that's where I start like, okay, we're going to talk intention, but I think that's part of what the anti-displacement work group works through. But if we, I think, reiterate or affirm with our recommendation that those are the things that we are concerned about and recommending be addressed, that's where I'm feeling like through this particular document, we can elevate that. So I appreciate your comments, Chris.
So maybe what Nick is editing right now, because I want everybody to kind of be comfortable with the document, is when we say to minimize displacement of residents and businesses, that there's a sub bullet. So the piece that he just highlighted is indented. So it's minimize property takings. And then the next sub bullet of that is have policies and procedures in place to minimize/prevent economic and cultural displacement. Because it gets to the physical displacement of this building or thing is directly impacted, as well as unintended effects of the work that is going on. Does that hit more of the mark?
For me, it does. Sorry, I was using the reactions and then I realized you probably can't see them, Sophia. But yeah.
No, I'm sorry.
How does that feel for you, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, as I think exactly how you said it from the anti-displacement work makes perfect sense to me.
Okay. Sorry that I have not been I'm not as physically present in the meeting, but I think we've kind of gone down the document. Is there any kind of other area of things that folks feel that was not included as part of the things that the BAC has been talking about? maybe since I hear silence, Chair and others, are folks comfortable with this document as modified being forwarded to the CMC?
I'm comfortable with it, but I've read over it a couple times, so I wonder what the fresh eyes are feeling.
Chris, KB, you do a thumbs up to Felicia. I can't see it, but it's just Ian in chat. Others. Oh, I can see thumbs up. Cool.
So a thumbs up from
Looks good to
KB.
me.
KB, you got to change your skin color on there. It looked yellow. There you go. Any thoughts, Chris? How are you feeling about having this forwarded to the CMC?
I would prefer 21st wasn't an option, but I am okay with it as is.
Thank you. Okay. Is Mike Opat still on here? I don't know if he's.
I am. I haven't read it in detail. It seems light on suburban interests, but I'm not going to try to change it here. The CMC is going to have to make those considerations, I guess, on their own.
So just a point of clarity, does this come back to us, or is the CMC sort of like the final say that they're the decision maker in the room? Or does it come back to us for one last speak, or do we just read about it in the news? How does that communication work?
So we're gonna, since this CMC meeting is kind of a, I would say pivotal meeting, critical meeting, important meeting, we're gonna be writing up kind of a newsletter about the meeting itself and sending it out. Felicia, we can work with you if there's, specific things that are related to the BAC or comes up in discussion, having Panu kind of write this group so that folks kind of hear. Overall, in terms of, well, I should say, maybe I can transition a little bit into next steps and process for folks, kind of what happens next, if that makes sense. We're ready.
Well, Sophia, I mean, you should answer the question. The CMC is the decision-making group.
Yes, yeah. So
This
that's
is an
what
advisory committee to the CMC. They're the management committee. This is an advisory committee.
Yes, that's Mike. That's where I was trying to go. So basically, kind of what happens next is the CMC, is, like Mike said, is the corridor management committee, is a voting body. So they will be taking a vote. And then based on that vote, we'll be taking kind of the official steps to go to Hennepin County and Met Council to adopt the route. And so that'll all kind of happen the next couple weeks with the final vote at the Met Council on June 22nd. We, related to this committee, so this committee's charter is set forth through kind of this route recommendation. We're proposing that we have another meeting in July that will both be kind of a culmination of what happened at CMC and those elected bodies or appointed bodies or the official bodies, however you want to say that, and have the final meeting be kind of a summary of that, a discussion of what, as we move into the next phase, this committee really wants staff to pay attention to and consider, and then focus most of the meeting on anti-displacement and kind of an update to this committee on that work. And then the charter for this group is basically completed. So the CAC, BAC was seated to get us to this route recommendation. The committees will continue but we'll enter a formal reappointment process to go through kind of the environmental timeframe on the project. So whichever entity appointed you will be basically working to reappoint you, including those of us that appointed folks from, if you're appointed from Hennepin County or the Met Council, we'll have an application again. So we didn't want this to be the last meeting, even though technically these votes kind of end this group's charter. We want to kind of have that culmination meeting as well as a commitment to continue talking about anti-displacement. And then would really encourage everybody to kind of continue with us as we enter this next phase and get a lot into the design and environmental work. You know, that's all assuming that if things go as planned at these next meetings. They could not, but that's how we have it outlined right now. So it is kind of to the root of, I think, the question. It is an official action that's happening, and it is kind of the deciding moment in a sense. But what it really does is just open up the next stage of a lot of work.
So thank you guys for that clarification. Super helpful in understanding the road ahead. I guess a clarifying question. So my understanding is that today is our last day as this convening body, and then there's a reappointment process that's going to continue out the future phases and conversations of the light rail. Is that so? So like the conversation of 21st will be amongst a reappointed group and not this same group?
Correct. So we would propose to have a July meeting with this group, and then we'll kind of reappoint folks. I hope most of the phases that are here today will continue on in the next phase. I think all of your input has been super valuable and will continue to be. We just have to take that official step of kind of like the terms ended, right? And so we have to just go through that process of officially making sure we have members and good attendance from all the cities represented.
Got it. So then just a matter of assumption, is there assumption that those who are on this call, if they personally choose to continue along the journey, that they will be automatically reappointed, or is that they will have to go through their application process again to be considered and formally redesignated? Because I think that there should be grandfathering in, if you will, of folks who are on this call to continue to the next phase without having to go through the process of how we initially got here.
So we, each municipality has kind of the jurisdiction to determine how they appoint their members. So in some cases, the city of Crystal, for example, might write its members and say, hey, do any of you want to continue? So we have to, as the project team, we need to leave it up to our municipal partners to kind of choose how they want to handle that process. Regarding the Met Council and the Hennepin County appointments, since some folks have fallen off, we do want to do an application process just because we have some seats that we want to fill and make sure that we have people attending. But in general, if we've had folks that have been serving with us that have been very active, it would be very rare not to reappoint somebody. But it helps with the paper trail and we get asked a lot, like, well, why did you pick that member? How did you weigh it? So it is pretty important for us to actually do the application process, because then it's transparent of why folks are on the committee.
Yeah, I understand that. I just want to make sure that there's the consideration that we all know that whether it's said or unsaid, the politics or whatever could not allow said people to be back on this call in the future. And I think that if we've been engaged and participating throughout this engagement process, I think that there is on a level of, if we want to continue the process. So I think it sounds like the process is set up to allow us to continue the process. I just wanted to say what probably maybe some of us are thinking, hearing it. But thank you for the
Gotcha.
clarification.
Gotcha. Well, it is 9:30. I would just add that the BAC meeting normal schedule is the day after 4th of July. So pushing back a week and having our last meeting that I don't have the calendar in front of me, so I can't, that second Tuesday after the 5th plus 7, that next Tuesday. So we're not in the 4th of July week.